All right, welcome back, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today because we are diving headfirst into a topic that usually kind of floats around in the realm of mystery. Yep, we're talking about manifestation. Now, we've all heard the advice to just put things out into the universe, right? But today, we're going to completely demystify that whole concept in this explainer. We're going to break down the ancient philosophy, share some wild real-world stories, and most importantly, we're looking at the hard neuroscience that actually explains why this stuff works. So, get ready because we're basically building a bridge right between belief and biology. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever been, totally wrestling with a big decision and suddenly you start seeing the exact same sequence of numbers everywhere? Like on license plates or your coffee receipts or the clock? Or maybe you were waiting on some massive news and instead of spiraling into anxiety, you just felt this very strange, deep-seated calm wash over you. Well, these aren't just random glitches in the matrix. Across both mystical traditions and modern psychology, these are actually considered really vital indicators of what is going on inside your own mind. And there's this brilliant, beautifully poetic concept in the law of assumption community that captures this perfectly. It's called birds before land. Think about ancient sailors out on the open ocean for a second. Long before they could actually physically see the shoreline, they'd start spotting birds flying up in the sky. Now, the birds obviously weren't the destination itself, but they were the early indicators that land was in fact approaching. It's the exact same idea here. Spiritual seekers look for signs and synchronicities as reassurance that their desire is actually solidifying into reality, even if they can't quite see the final result just yet. Now, one of the most common birds people run into are angel numbers. In ancient numerology, a 0 is all about pure potential and new beginnings. 1 stands for creation and focus. 2 is balance. 3 is creativity. 5 signals a major change and freedom. And 8, which is a huge one for a lot of people, represents abundance and success. Whether you view this as mystical guidance or just your brain locking onto a pattern, it gives us a really fascinating look at how goal setting has been framed for literally centuries. Okay, so that brings us to part 1, the law of assumption. A ton of this philosophy is heavily rooted in the mid-century teachings of a guy named Neville Goddard. He contrasted the two halves of our consciousness using these classical, almost metaphorical terms. He basically described the conscious mind as the male aspect. It's personal, it's selective, and its whole job is just to generate ideas. The subconscious mind, on the flip side, is the female aspect. It's totally impersonal. It doesn't select or filter anything. It simply acts as this womb of creation that takes those ideas and expresses them. So the conscious mind chooses the destination, but the subconscious mind does the actual heavy lifting to build it. And this leads to an absolutely crucial point. Goddard wrote, "Feeling is the one and only medium through which ideas are conveyed to the subconscious." That is huge. The subconscious mind does not originate ideas. It genuinely doesn't care if a thought is good, bad, or totally indifferent. It simply accepts whatever the conscious mind deeply feels to be true, and then it just goes right to work objectifying that feeling into your physical reality. Which moves us nicely into part 2. Feeling is the secret. It's one thing to talk about esoteric philosophy, right? But what does this feeling of having actually look like for normal people in practice? There's this incredible story I want to share from a modern Reddit forum. This user was really trying to turn their financial situation around. So they stopped obsessively checking their bank account every 5 minutes, and instead they just started cultivating this feeling of, I will always have money. They described feeling this strange calm and a deep-seated knowing. And guess what? Shortly after dropping all that anxiety and just sitting in that calm feeling, they randomly got an email about a totally forgotten claim from a year and a half ago. Out of nowhere, they were awarded over $5,000. The feeling of abundance literally preceded the actual cash. Here is another wild one from that exact same forum. A high school student saw a commercial for those $300 Beats headphones. But instead of stressing out about how on earth they were going to afford them, they just closed their eyes and imagined the physical sensation of wearing them. They felt the weight on their head, they imagined looking at themselves in the mirror, they even imagined feeling the bass boost thumping in their ears. They didn't worry about the how at all. Later, that exact same day, their mom came home from a game show with a bunch of prizes, and yep, you guessed it, the exact headphones were right there. They assumed the feeling of having, and the universe just filled in all the blanks. Now we're getting into the really fun stuff. Part 3, the science of manifestation. Okay, so we've talked about ancient philosophy, we've gone through some modern stories, but now we are dropping the scientific anchor. We're going to explain exactly why these spiritual laws actually work biologically in your brain. Prepare for a massive aha moment here. Let me introduce you to the reticular activating system, or the RAS. This is a literal bundle of nerves sitting right there in your brainstem. Its entire biological purpose is to filter the millions of bits of data coming at you every single second and selectively hunt for information that validates your core beliefs and your goals. It is basically the scientific twin to Goddard's subconscious mind. It actively stops you from noticing anything that contradicts your internal programming, and it hunts for the evidence that proves your feelings right. To put this abstract neuroscience into perspective, think about the classic blue car analogy. Imagine you suddenly decide you want to buy a small blue car. What happens next? Suddenly, you are seeing small blue cars literally everywhere. They're on the highway, they're parked on your street, they're in the background of commercials. Now, were those cars magically teleported into your reality? No way. They were always there. But your RAS was previously filtering them out as irrelevant noise. By changing your goal, changing your feeling, your RAS suddenly made those blue cars highly relevant to your reality. And folks, that is the literal science of manifestation. And the data backs this up in just a staggering way. Research published in the Frontiers in Human Neuroscience showed a massive 240% increase in brain activation and neural pathway strength simply through visualization. Let that sink in. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference between vividly visualizing an action and actually performing it out in the physical world. The exact same neural pathways fire. So it's not just magic, it is pure biology. All right, bringing it all together with part 4, hacking your reality. So the big question is, how do we intentionally hack our reality and program that RAS to actually reach our goals? Well, the source material gives us some very specific structured gateways. Gateway number 1 is sleep. Neville Goddard points out that sleep takes up a whole third of our lives, and it's the most natural door into the subconscious. The steps are pretty simple. First, lie flat on your back to get physically relaxed. Second, assume the feeling of the answered wish. And remember, not the desperate desire for it, but the feeling of already having it. Finally, quietly relax into unconsciousness. But here is the absolute key. You must never, ever go to sleep feeling discouraged, because sleep basically seals in the creative act. Whatever you're feeling right as you drift off is literally the instruction manual you are handing over to your subconscious for the next day. Gateway number 2 is prayer and visualization. Now, in this context, prayer is not about begging the universe or trying to force a wish to come true. It's more like a state akin to sleep. You create a passive meditative reflection. You consciously shut out your physical senses, which Goddard calls ignoring the 3D reality, and you yield entirely to the wish as an accomplished fact. Effort is actually fatal here. If you're straining and stressing, you're just sending a feeling of lack straight to your RAS. You have to effortlessly yield to the feeling of having. Now, once you've planted that seed, you've got to maintain the assumption during your waking hours. Let's rapid fire through some tips for your daily life. First, strengthen your mental diet. You have to cut out that negative self-talk. Express constant gratitude, because that just reinforces the feeling of having. Ignore contradictory 3D reality. Don't let a current setback dictate your inner assumption. This one's important. Avoid overinterpreting signs. Remember the birds before land? Seeing angel numbers is just an indicator, it's not the final manifestation, so don't obsess over them. And finally, stay completely detached from the timing. Just let it unfold. So this leaves us with a pretty profound question to wrap up on today. We've looked at the mystical philosophy of Neville Goddard, the sailors finding their birds before land, and the hard neuroscience of the reticular activating system. If your brain and the universe work in the exact same way, responding to your deeply held feelings and actively filtering your reality to match them, does it even matter if we call it science or magic? The mechanism is sitting right there inside your head, just waiting for you to use it. So I challenge you to test this out in your own life tonight as you go to sleep. Assume the feeling of your answered wish and let your brain do the rest. Thank you so much for diving into this explainer with me today, and I'll catch you in the next one.